or at least a very negative interpretation of policy. Iran-Contra had come unraveled at that point. Matter of fact, John Lewis Gaddis makes a slightly different point about what I might call contingency in history. Had John Hinckley's bullet been just slightly to one side, this would have been, the Reagan administration would have been a footnote to history, because it came in about the first year of his presidency when that happened. I don't know, but when I was there for the OAH convention this spring, the convention hotel was the Hilton, which is where Reagan was exiting when Hinckley shot and hit him. Interesting point about contingency. But let me come down to this final point in what Herring has to say. Triumphalist myth. A myth that emphasizes and Herring, I think, would say, glorifies the role of America in the world and its success and power. He refers to a triumphalist myth among Reagan partisans. Interesting whether or not you can put Gaddis there. That by standing forth boldly for freedom, confronting the Soviets, etc., that it was in fact Reagan who brought the evil empire to its knees. This, keep in mind, is not what Herring is arguing. It's what he's arguing against. This is what he sees as a myth. And it is, although Gaddis is too good an historian to fall entirely into that camp, but it does point in the direction of John Gaddis's interpretation. Herring says, no way. This is problematic. And so, as I say here, Herring reaches the conclusion that if you really want to understand the end of the Cold War, you have to understand the Soviet Union. And you have to understand Mikhail Gorbachev. That's where the emphasis should be. Not that Reagan is to be dismissed in that. But as I said earlier, if one of the key questions here is, where does the emphasis fall? On Reagan and what Reagan did, or on Gorbachev and what Gorbachev did, Herring is in the complete opposite camp. You've got to look at Gorbachev. You've got to look at the Soviet Union. Reagan responds to initiatives and situations that emerge from the other side. Right? Just let me stop for a moment. I don't know, do the two sides seem clear to you? I mean, does it seem pretty clear how they're arguing different things? Again, when you think about it, from the same timeline, they're not disputing whether an invasion of Grenada took place. They're not disputing whether an Iran-Contra happened. They're not disputing the nature of the existence of four major summits between Reagan and Gorbachev in Reagan's second term. But they're really trying to come to grips with what it all means. And in the process of coming to grips with what it all means, they don't find themselves standing in the same corner at all. It's Gaddis versus Herring, and Herring versus Gaddis on this one. Let me show you an example that I think might help bring this into some stark relief. In 1983, there was an important moment, an event that I would be surprised, without having read this material, in either of these books, I don't think you know about this at all. NATO annually conducts military exercises in Europe. And in 1983, under the code name of Able Archer 83 for 1983, NATO included high-ranking officials in this, higher than normal. Soviets trying to figure out what this all meant. Well, 1983. If you think about the timeline, Reagan the Reagan rhetoric has been quite heated about the Soviet Union by this period of time, right? Reagan's defense buildup is underway. I mean, Carter actually started a defense buildup in 1978, early 1979. Reagan takes it to another level. The early 1980s, right? Here's how Gaddis treats this event. Reagan and Bush. Reagan comes to the conclusion. He pushed the Russians far enough. It was time for another speech. That speech, if you know the real nitty-gritty of detail here, and I don't expect you to do, made a reference that Reagan himself wrote into the speech, essentially saying that he had a feeling that with all the tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union side, that if Jim and Sally, okay, just two names you may pick out of here, and Ivan and Anya were to come together and talk, that they would get along very well. That in point of fact, the people in the Soviet Union and the people in the United States essentially both wanted peace. Both wanted to get along and could get along with one another. And so this becomes a very conciliatory speech, a real change in rhetoric, a real change in the oratory that Reagan uses, right? Now, and maybe you should shut this off, Richard, for the moment, because